All right.
All righty, we are officially live. I'm so excited to have you all here. My name is Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. I have our guest here today. She's Ashira Prossack. She is our resident expert on. I'm so excited to have you. The volume on. She's our resident expert on interviews and tips and how to prepare yourself for professional interviews. We're going to get started in 10 minutes here. So if you're watching the recording of this, actually fast forward 9 minutes. We're going to get started at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But for anybody's here watching right now, Ashira and I are just going to chat a little bit and just open up the workshop a little bit with some casual conversation. So Ashira, thanks so much for being here and joining me on the workshop tonight.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting with everybody tonight.
Of course, of course. So I'd love, just if you could, tell me a little bit about you and your background and how you got into this type of work.
So what I do now is I work to bridge the gap between generations. So really focusing on how to help everyone in the workplace succeed. Because of course, we're always talking about millennials. Now we have Gen Z coming. But the fact is that there's on any team, 2, 3, or sometimes even 4 different generations working together. So there can be a lot of conflict. There's a lot of misinformation out there with, both what the generations like and what they don't like. And of course, tech is always the answer. But the thing is that people are actually the answer, and building that sense of connection, helping people understand each other, that's what really makes the workplace work. So what I like to do with millennials and Gen Z is really help them fit into this world and find careers they love and get themselves on the right path from the beginning. So that's what I'm here to do today, is help everybody out with some interview tips and prep tips and anything else we can, think of, and always welcome questions from everybody. So whoever's on, think of things. I'll be answering them live as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's super cool how you describe it as, sure, we've got like the future of work in the workplace, but it's all about humans. And it's about that human connection there. What made you fascinated in this? Why did you get involved in this in the first place?
Well, as a millennial myself, I was literally faced with this when I was working. I was in retail management and HR for most of my career. I spent 5 years in retail, and I've got about what's going on 14 years in management altogether. But it was really my time in retail that kind of drew attention to the fact that, oh, hey, I'm a millennial. And I had one of my fellow coworkers come to me one day and say, oh, Ashira, why is this person, one of their employees, acting like this? I said to them, I have no idea. I said, but you're a millennial, they're a millennial. So, and I realized, wow, okay, these stereotypes are really, really prevalent in the workplace. So I started, again, I've been kind of doing it all throughout my career as a young person, dealing with them, overcoming them. But I really started to study them and figure out, again, what's causing them, why, how do we fix it? And so that was, for me, it was just a really natural transition into my training and consulting and coaching business, which I've been doing for about 3.5 years now.
That's really cool. So, what's fascinating is, at least to me, so I guess what I'm curious to know, because here's something, I think I hear a lot of people, they talk about the stereotypes of millennials. I feel like I hear that all the time, or Gen Z, and I feel more often than not, it's not like all of a sudden these people are totally foreign, like as if that year cutoff between two people's ages It makes them totally different people. I think we're all on a basic human level humans, and we all have similar drivers, but I think we also suffer from amnesia. We forget about how we were when we were younger. I even see this sometimes with, when we're facilitating mentorships for students, as a student, sometimes you're still figuring out that comfort level with reaching out to a stranger. Even if this stranger had said, hey, I would like to mentor you, it's like getting them to reach out. As you get older, you realize, man, if someone's willing to help me, I want to take advantage of it. But as a 18 to 22-year-old, it can be tough to get there. And maybe you've forgotten as a professional what that actually means and like what kind of barriers you might be going through to actually reach out and take that first step, that first leap forward.
Absolutely. And, honestly, I catch myself doing it. I'm 33 and, I definitely say, kids today and, and just, it hasn't been that long since I was in my early 20s, but a decade's a really long time when you actually stop to think about it. And, again, we all forget that we were young once. And yes, young does look different now than it did, especially when we're talking the baby boomers, when there's 50 years since they were in their early teen, late teens, early 20s. But the thing is that a lot of the, I would say, mistakes that we find a lot of, Gen Z and millennials making are simply because they're new to the workforce. They don't know yet. They haven't learned. They don't know what are the unwritten rules, and, the way that things work, luckily, is changing. You don't have to put in 25 years at a company to reach executive level. You can't just say, I've been here 6 months, where's my raise and my promotion? But progression is happening quicker. And I think in a lot of ways, and I've experienced this myself, is that there's almost, and it's an unintentional resentment, but I had to work. I had to put in my 10 years. Why do these new employees get to jump ship, and they get 3 years and they're promoted?
And I even see, well, that's interesting. I definitely get that. But I think that that's the case with the workforce. I think what's happening right now is management of companies are getting almost complacent, thinking like, okay, if we can keep these people here in this role, then we'll stash them.
Yep.
But, and for those that are eager to move up, you see them leave. I think a friend of mine used to work for Ernst & Young, and I think he mentioned that the CEO of EY was a 7-time boomerang, meaning that he came, left, came back, left 7 times.
Yeah.
And that's just fascinating to me. That's crazy. But I think the point is that he recognized that, okay, I've hit this level of where I'm going, and maybe I'm not going to be able to get promoted internally. Maybe take a diagonal move at a different company that works me up, and then keep moving up. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and it's super unfortunate, but super true. The best way to get a raise and the best way to get a promotion is to leave and come back. It's and again, working in HR, I mean, it's easier to give someone a, what would be effective, say a 20% raise when you don't have a base salary. If you're making, we'll say, okay, you're making 30,000 and you see a job offer where you can make 45. Well, if you go to your current company and you're making 30 and you say, I want 45,000, I mean, I'm not going to do the math, but that's a lot more than your standard, 3.5% raise.
Yeah, that's a 1.5%.
Is it?
Yeah, that's like a 50% raise. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Again, math. This is why I'm not a mathematician. But the thing is that the new company you're applying to has no idea what your base salary is. They don't know you're making 30. So for them to pay you 45 is just a lot more feasible. So, again, it's the sad truth. It's also why we see a lot of early career professionals who are still struggling today with money, because when you start out low, your 5% raise or your 10% raise is still on a salary that was already too low.
That's a really interesting point, because it's a different perspective from the perspective we got yesterday in our workshop. Our guest was talking about looking also, like he said, oftentimes there's a reason why that salary is high. Like if you got to look at the culture and the people you're working with, like if you're looking at being miserable in your job, they might be making their own, I guess, hedges for raising that salary because they have acknowledged they struggled with turnover and they're struggling with their culture. And so that's something that he had brought up. But I think it's a fine balance of finding like the even keel between the two. But I think you're right. I think that oftentimes just only focusing on the culture doesn't necessarily mean that you accept a huge pay cut because ultimately you're loving the people you're working with. Although I think that is a huge factor, because you'd rather, I think, love the people you're working with, and obviously the ideal is love the people you're working with and make enough money to compensate yourself.
Obviously, that's the perfect, but it's again, it's always that age old. And I agree, it's the same thing, because there are definitely positions like, again, you look at a traditional, high stress industry. Again, if you're going to be in the financial sector, your salary is going to be higher, but you're also going to be experiencing a lot more stress. So, it's really, you have to look at, are you truly underpaid in your job now? To that, so is your 30 to the, the raised position 45, should there be 15,000, or should there really only be, were you underpaid because you were eager, you took the job, you didn't, you said the salary's fine, whatever, you're paying me that 30, great, I'm employed, I have money in my pocket.
Yeah, no,
it's really a catch-22, because you don't want to over negotiate and lose out an offer when you're in a situation where you don't have anything, but you can also be putting yourself in the position where, you might be starting yourself out at a low ball. But it's, there's no easy way to tell until we get salary transparency. All you can do is do your homework and hope for the best.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. And we're going to jump into more of that right now. By the way, if you were just jumping in now, you've missed nothing. Ashira and I are just chatting casually before we get started, but it is 8 o'clock and it is officially time to get started. My name is Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition and Motion. I have our guest, Ashira Prossack, tonight. We're going to be talking about interviews. We're going to talk about how to nail that interview. When you go into the interview, when you put in your resume, when you've gone through the whole process, the whole interview process, that is what we're going to talk about tonight. But I want to set the expectation properly because ultimately this workshop is going to be 45 minutes long with another 15 minutes for Q&A at the very end. If you have any questions during this workshop, please post them in the comment section. That's how we know that you're here. So post in the comment section. I'm going to ask questions throughout the workshop this evening. I'm going to expect you to answer them. That's essentially how we know that you're here. That's how we know that you're participating. That's how we know that you're actively taking advantage of the program. Now, you should have already met with your mentor by now. If you have not, get on it. Hopefully you've already had 2 calls with your mentor. If so, amazing. You're on it. Good for you. That's fantastic. I am so excited for the new insight that you're going to gain from your mentor. I'm so excited for the insight you're going to gain from this workshop this evening, but I cannot stress the importance enough of reaching out to your mentor. If you have not already, get on it, get started. I don't care what you got going on in your semester. I think so often I hear from students, they say, oh, well, I got this really big exam or I got this big project. It's like in 4 months from right now, that will be worthless. That'll be meaningless in your life because at the end of the day, in December, when that semester ends, you're moving on to new classes. But this relationship you build with your mentor could last a lifetime. It could be the door that opens up your next job. It could be the door that opens up your next internship. You have no idea. It could be the recommendation that gets you into a graduate program. But if you neglect this relationship, it's not going to serve you when it's time, when the time is right. You need to build it. You need to water it like as if it's a plant. You need to nourish that relationship. But if you're, I know, and I get it, by the way, and this is not me telling you, hey, don't study for your exams. But it is me telling you, like, whatever exams you have, your grade is probably not going to change that much from having an hour-long conversation with your mentor on a once a month, once every few weeks basis. So get on it, reach out. You got nothing to lose. Get going on it because this relationship can change your life. Now, we're going to be talking about the interview today. But really what I want to focus on for this workshop tonight is I want to focus on intentionality. So one thing that happened last weekend, it was my grandma's 97th birthday. She is up there. She is kicking. And one thing that I thought about when I thought about my grandma, she always asked me, Garrett, what did you learn today? What did you learn today? And when I was younger, I'd always say things like, oh, nothing. Like I didn't learn anything today, like a dumb teenager and little kid. But the point, I guess she ended up really writing home to me was that she would keep asking me. She said, well, what'd you learn today? I'm not going to let nothing be an answer. And what it forced me to do was it forced me to be intentional about the things that I had learned during that day. And that was huge because ultimately when you're intentional about the things that you do and the way that you spend your time, you are much more likely to retain that information. But if you're going through the phases, like as if it's just a day-to-day schedule, wake up, go to class, go do homework, go to work, whatever, come home, and it's just day to day to day to day, you are not going to retain that information that you're learning, plain and simple. So when it comes to the interview, I have a question for you, and that is, how do you want people to feel about you? What is the intention that you want to set for that interview? So in other words, what feeling are you trying to convey about yourself when you're in an interview? Post that in the comments section. I'd love to learn about it. I would love to learn about your thoughts on the interview process and how you want people to feel about you. Post that in the interview process right now. So because I just think the importance of intentionality is so key. It's so crucial because if you're not intentional about the things that you're doing, how are you going to know if you've actually gotten there, whether that be the roadmap for your life and your career or the roadmap for how you want this interview to go? If you don't have an intention about this, it's going to be difficult for you to achieve the outcome you want. So write in the comment section, what is the feeling that you want to instill in people about you when you're in the interview? Love to see it. Aaron, you want people to feel like you are confident in the interview. That's awesome. Everybody share more. I want to learn more about how do you want people to so Rachel, sophisticated, very cool. Frank, you want to be impressive and unique. That's okay. How are you going to do? And then I think the next challenge is, how are you actually going to go about doing that? How are you going to actually accomplish this? Noah, you said, okay, so you're just checking in. But Holland, you want people to feel like they can trust you in an interview. That's really cool. Trust is a very key component to any conversation. If you can build trust with somebody, that's a huge, huge thing. Samantha, you said you want to be sure that you get across that you're the type of person you are. Your ability or inability to do the job means nothing if you don't mesh with the company's culture. Great point, Samantha. Super, super on spot on. Justin, you mentioned that you're very serious about working there and that you will be a valuable piece to their team. Love it. Noah, you said you want to come off as well prepared and honest. May, you said you're passionate about your career. That's great. Darren, you said you want them to feel confident and competent. Max, you said you want people to see your passion for what you are doing, for your work and your energy. Hannah, you said you want people to see that you're well-rounded and devoted. I love that. These are fantastic. Cole, you said you want people to come off as someone who will be an asset to their company. I love that. Seriously, everybody, thank you so much for sharing. Emily, Matthew, Sahidi, Jaspreet, Emma, Zane. These are fantastic responses. Thank you all for sharing about how you want people to feel about you in the interview process. That's super crucial. So one thing that I want to jump into right now before we get started, and that is the 3 keys to being successful in this program. I've shared them at each workshop before, and I'm going to continue sharing them because they are so important. And that is your strategy, your story, and your state. Now, I said that in reverse order of importance. Now, your state, and that's the number one and most important thing. I don't care how tired, angry, mad, sad, dejected, jealous you are or you have in your life. If you are coming into something in a state not conducive for being successful, I can promise you, you won't be successful. If you're going to an interview and you've got all this built up frustration, anger, sadness, madness, jealousy in your head, you will not give off a good impression. I can promise you, the impression that you want to set, the intention that you want to set for yourself, if you've got a bunch of bullshit running in the background and you let that affect your physiology, you will not give off great body language. You will give off weird vibes. That's just what's going to happen. But fortunately, you can get yourself into a state conducive for being successful because your emotions drive your emotions. So what I want you to do right now, because we are about to learn some information, and I want you to retain this information, is I want you to stand up and I want you to shake it out. I want you to get loose. I want you to shimmy. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. On the count of 3, I just want you to scream at the top of your lungs. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go. I don't care if other people are waking up because you are screaming and yelling and dancing around. I don't care if other people think that you're weird. This isn't a popularity contest. I don't care about them, and neither should you, because at the end of the day, if you are making the most out of this workshop, if you're making the most out of this content, you'll be as focused as you possibly can, because when you're moving, when you're getting your body going, you are sending blood to your brain, you are releasing endorphins in your mind that gets you in a state conducive for being successful. So yes, get loose, get cracking, get going, get out there. So state, that is what we just covered right there. The next part is your story. What is the story you tell yourself? Why are you going to be successful? Now, this is very much related to the question I just asked you, which is, how do you want to make people feel from the conversation itself? What is the feeling that you want to instill in the people that you're chatting with and that you're interviewing with? That is that intention, in that intentionality right there. Like envisioning, what does success look like from this? And then how are you going to do that? How are you going to convey confidence or competence, or that you're going to fit with their culture? How are you going to deliver that information so then they feel that way about you? What does that look like in your mind? Could you almost like play almost like a skit or a scenario in your mind where you're walking up into the interview and you're meeting with the interviewer and that you're conveying these messages, these feelings inside the person. So then when you leave their office, they're thinking to themselves, man, that person was really confident or competent, or that person really fit our culture, or this person really knows what they're talking about. Whatever it is, that is your story. And I really want you to focus on that in terms of the how. So I want you to write that in the comment section. How are you going to go about getting people to feel the way that you want them to feel about you in the interview process? Right in the comment section. Now, the last part is your strategy. What are the things that you're going to do to get yourself into a place where you're actually going about doing that, where you're actually going about getting to this outcome from this opportunity? How are you going to get there? What is going to happen? How are you going to make this work? So that's what we're going to cover today in this workshop. It's all about how you can crush the interview. How can you go into an interview and the entire process of the interview? So the resume, the cover letter, the follow-up, the intro, the outro. How do you make this right? How do you make this so then they feel, wow, this is the person I need to hire? We're going to talk about that today. Now, every workshop, I want you to get into a routine, because ultimately I know that when you get into routines, and when you share people your experiences going through this program, you are so much more likely to retain this information. You're so much more likely to get yourself into good habits. So I want you to find a new accountability partner. Your deliverable for this evening is to identify a new accountability partner. By the way, just one quick interjection on that. I apologize for our technical difficulties when uploading your accountability photos of you and your partner. You can either send it to myself or to Sydney, and we will count that for you. Once again, I'm so sorry about that. We just had a little bit of an issue on a technical side. So you can just send that to us via email and we will count it. But I want you to find an accountability partner. Should be different from somebody from the past 2 workshops, but I want you to share with your accountability 3 things that you've learned over this past week and 1 thing that you've done to get closer to landing your next internship or job. I want you to write that down. I want you to write that down. I want you to share that with your accountability partner and then take a picture with that person. Alternatively, you can post this on LinkedIn. And in fact, I would encourage you to do that in addition to this. Post it on LinkedIn and then tag us, share with us what you're learning and how you're taking steps towards getting closer to that internship. I want to know more about this. I want you to be intentional about how you are spending your time. So before we jump into our workshop this evening, I just wanted to have one last announcement, and that is our referral program. So next semester signups have already started for next semester, and I would love to have your help. If you can encourage some students from your chapter to get involved and sign up for the program next semester, I would greatly appreciate it. We have a referral program where if you refer 3 students to sign up from your chapter, your deposit for next semester cut in half. If you refer 6 or more students from your chapter to sign up next semester, you don't even have to pay a deposit. You're automatically enrolled. I just want to be able to help expose more students to get connected with mentors and have access to these workshops with our amazing guest speakers. And I'd love your help for getting there. The other thing that I was hoping that you could do is if you're enjoying yourself in the program, I would love if you could just get on your phone and take a video of yourself, a 30 to 60 second video describing your experience going through the program, and then send it my way, upload it to Google Drive, share it with me. I would love to learn about your experience, and I'd love to, just learn it from you in your own words. So that would be amazing. So let's jump into our workshop this evening. So our guest speaker is Ashira Prossack. Now, Ashira is awesome. I'm so excited to share her insight with you. Ashira is an internationally recognized multi-generational workplace expert, helping organizations manage, engage, attract, and retain next generation talent, and helping millennials and Gen Z develop as leaders and build business skills. Ashira's background includes 13 years in management and HR at companies in America, with 2 years abroad in Europe and Russia. She has worked with organizations ranging from family businesses to Fortune 100 companies, including ABC, NYPD, and Columbia University. She's a regular contributor for Forbes and has been featured in Business Insider, The Telegraph, Fast Company, Glassdoor, FlexJobs, and other industry publications. Ashira, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to chatting with everybody tonight.
Yes, this is so exciting. I'm really excited for students to learn just a little bit about you and more or less how you've gotten to what you're doing today and the work that you're doing. So I'd love to know, I guess to get started is, how do you keep your network up to date? What do you do to keep people in your network engaged with what's going on with your world? Because I think that's so crucial. I feel like often we'll meet people, we'll have connections. Maybe it was 3 months ago, maybe it was 6 months ago, maybe it was a year ago, maybe it was longer than that. And then we lose touch, and then we realize, crap, I haven't reached out to this person in like a year. How do we stay in touch with them? How have you been able to stay in touch with your network over time?
So I definitely do the most of my connections on LinkedIn. I mean, it's literally the platform for business, so it's meant for it. It's easy because it also has pictures of people, because I am terrible with names. I will remember a face forever, but names is definitely a struggle for me. So it's great to have that face with the name. So that's a little memory jog for myself. But it's also a great way because everyone, if you're not on LinkedIn, you need to be. Everyone in the business world is on LinkedIn. They may not be active on LinkedIn, but they have a LinkedIn profile, and they certainly will check their messages and, at least periodically kind of, scroll through their news feed, see what's going on. So what I do is I share a lot of articles. I share my own content. I share other content that I think is going to be helpful. With certain people, if I read an article and go, oh my gosh, I just talked with John the other day and we were discussing something similar. So I'll send John a direct message with the link, or again, I'll email him. I am not a huge social media person. I spend time on it, but it's like posting and keeping up with it is a full-time job, and it's just not my thing. So wherever you're active. If you're really active on Twitter and you've got, people in your network on Twitter, engage with them that way. The point of it is to do something that's going to feel natural for yourself. Instagram and Snapchat, no, that's really not the place unless you're going for a job in, creative industry where you are, or you're looking for, doing something in social media. In that case, utilize that as a showcase in a way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. One thing that I also like on top of just to add to that I'll do is every 3 months I send my network a network update. I mean, I've got a big list of people that I want to keep in touch with what's going on with my world. And every 3 months I send them a mass email. Every single person I'll send an individual email just kind of saying like, hey, this is what's going on in my world. This is what I've accomplished over the last few months. This is what I'm working towards. And these are people I'm trying to meet. If you have any suggestions on people to meet with in that space or any advice that you'd be willing to offer, I would love to have it. But if not, I just wanted to give you an update.
And that's fantastic. And especially when you're in that job search stage, that's a way to just keep yourself top of mind with your current mentor, past mentors, people you've, worked for, you've done internships in the past. Stay in touch with not only the hiring manager or your direct manager, but the people that you worked with, because you guys could have all gone in a million different directions. And maybe you want to work at Microsoft and someone in your intern group is now working at Microsoft. So you can reach out to them and they wouldn't know and you wouldn't know unless you, take that first step. And that's, I think, a lot of it too, is that you just have to put yourself out there and do it. You can't expect people to make that initial correspondence to you, even if they say they will sometimes. Don't ever be afraid to put yourself out there, whether it's by email, on social media, on LinkedIn. Just do it. The worst can happen is they'll say no, or they'll just never respond.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You've got nothing to lose. I love that. And I think on top of that, when you're meeting with someone and they say, hey, I'm going to introduce you to XYZ person, if they haven't introduced you yet, one thing that you can do is literally write the email out for them. Just saying like, dear, insert that person's name. I would like to introduce you to insert my name because he's working on A, B, C, and D. I thought you both enjoyed connecting. I'll let you both take it from here to schedule a call. Sincerely, that person. So all they have to do is copy and paste. There's no excuse for why they won't introduce you. When you make it super easy for people to make an intro, the likelihood that you're going to get that intro increases substantially. What do you think?
Absolutely. And, I'll tell you too, is that a lot of times when those connections aren't made, it's just because people get really busy. It's not that they don't want to or anything. It's just that life happens and life gets in the way. Yeah. So don't get discouraged by it. I think that's kind of the moral of the story, is just push forward, do what you're doing. Never be afraid to send at least 2 follow-up emails, whether that's, again, reaching out pre-job, during a job, interview, whatever. Never take no for an answer until you've gotten either all no's or 3 radio silences.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Honestly, I think you can even go beyond that. But that's awesome. So who are the mentors in your life? How have they helped you get to where you're at today? I'd love to learn a little bit about your story, any trials and tribulations you had when going through the interview process and what you learned from that.
So I always love to share. I've got some amazing and fantastic mentors in my life. I like to share the cautionary tale. Never be afraid to break up with a mentor, because I had a mentor whom, well, I thought was a mentor, I guess, let's put it that way. And not only was I given just really poor business advice, but this person actually prompted me to spend a fairly substantial amount of money on a program that turned out was really not in alignment with anything we had discussed. And, again, she was, I guess, a partner with this company or whatever. So she got a kickback for it, for any program she sold. And, the relationship started out great. There was no, I don't really know what happened other than, again, she just wanted to fill her pockets. So after that, and after realizing it, I said, thank you for what you've done for me. But, this is, I think, we've reached a great point to part ways, and let's just keep this, informal. Again, that's when you say, we'll stay in touch. And we both know that that's not going to happen.
Okay,
so,
that's fascinating. Yeah, that's cool. Sorry, keep going. Tell us.
You're not always going to get the best advice just because a person is mentoring you. Now, obviously in the program you're in, that's totally not like any of the mentors you're matched with, everything here, listen to them. They have your best interest at heart. But sometimes, again, you'll find that a person may say, oh, let me take you under, my wing. You remind me of, when I was your age. And, maybe they have their, some good intentions, but if they don't pan out, never be afraid to walk away.
Yeah.
So, again, just trust your gut with that and be polite. Never say, oh, you lied to me, whatever. To say, again, I think that I've really gotten a lot out of it, but I'm going to pursue some time. I need some time, to focus on my internship, to focus on my job search. And you end amicably, and that's that.
And I think not only that, but on top of that, I would say that sometimes you'll get some advice from some mentors. Like I have a couple mentors in my life where I go to them for very specific conversations. And the conversations sometimes bleed over into another point of my life, but I know that the insight they give on that is just something I diabolically disagree with. So I steer the conversations to specifically the thing that I really want to focus with them. And that has made those relationships much more positive, because then we're only talking about the thing that really we both have a common ground on, that I really need that support on. Because yeah, you're right. I think, and I don't think I'm never a fan of like burning that bridge or letting it go. But I also think for that situation, that's an odd one. I know I've had mentors before where, yeah, I would listen to them advice on multiple avenues of life. And I realized in one avenue, I pretty much like it didn't work out, any of the advice. And that's okay. You learn that from your own experiences, but it's knowledge. And the other components, like they're also, a genuinely good person on this other part of their life. And, you kind of pick that up. But that's a really cool cautionary tale. But I want to know more about you when it comes to interviews, when it comes to going into interviews and like interviewing for a role, a job. What are some things that you've had to go through? What are some trials and tribulations that you faced?
So one of them is just really being prepared. I mean, when I was interviewing, when I moved back to America from my time in Russia, it was, like night and day. I was really, for the first time in my life, having to go through and sit down and interview. I really didn't have a network anymore. I'd been gone for a few years. I was literally filling out job applications and submitting them and not hearing back from a whole heck of a lot of people. And so, it really got me thinking like, okay, what am I doing wrong? My qualifications are there. It's not that I don't have, the requirements or whatever. And to be honest, I didn't always have all of them. You never need to have 100% of, their laundry list of things that say you must have A through Z. You really don't. Obviously if they want a specific programming language or, or a certain subset of knowledge, then yeah. But a lot of things like you'll see, oh, you need, like the everything, your very first job, you need 5 years of experience. Like, okay, how? That's not going to ever turn a hiring manager off from looking at an application. If they're going to look at it, they're going to read your cover letter. So what I learned was that, and there's all kinds of contradicting advice that, cover letters are dead. Nobody reads them. Yes and no. You never know if the hiring manager will read it or they won't. So always assume they will. Because when I was in HR, that was what I would do is, I didn't really care about the resume because, it's a resume. That's fine. I'll look at that secondary. I actually looked at the cover letters first because that helped me get to know the candidate as a person. And that's something else that I learned from my own interviews when I was job searching, was that I was kind of trying to be this perfect, whatever the heck that means, which of course doesn't exist. But I was trying to be this, oh, what do they want in the role? What do I think, a sales manager should sound like and be like? And I lost all of myself. And, newsflash, I didn't get callbacks for those interviews. When I finally decided, okay, you know what? I'm just going to be myself. I'm going to be that, again, I am an energetic person. I'm outgoing. And I let that show through in the interview. I suddenly was getting callbacks or feedback from the hiring manager that they said, okay, thank you. You're not, some of them, okay, you don't have the right qualifications, but we're going to keep your resume on file in case another position opens.
Yeah.
So it's really a lot of just, again, I know that be yourself is really like one of the hardest things to do. But what I mean when I say be yourself is that don't push down any elements of your personality. If you're bubbly and boisterous and outgoing, be bubbly and outgoing. If you're quiet and reserved, you don't have to sit there and go, yay, I'm a cheerleader, because it's fake. You'll feel fake. They'll see through it. So be your true personality, I guess is the best way to put it.
And the worst part is that even if you're good enough at faking it, that means that they're expecting you to be like that once you're in the job. And if you're not consistent with that, you're gonna hate it even more.
Exactly. And that's it. Like, it's forget even like what they'll think. If you're faking it from day one, by month 3, you're going to be emotionally drained and you're probably going to be looking for a new job if you've even made it that long. So you're not doing yourself any favors by being inauthentic in an interview.
Yeah. I want to backtrack real quick because Hannah had a question about something we talked about a couple minutes ago, and that was about reaching out to people in your network that you've not talked with in a while. So she said, I'm afraid that if I don't talk to someone for a while and then reach out, it'll be awkward for the other person. How should I begin the message and make it seem seamless? I would say, hey, Jane Doe, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I wanted to give you an update about some things that are going on with my world, and I just would love to learn your feedback. This is something that I've been working towards lately, and here are the things that I'm really focused on right now. If you have any advice or guidance, I would love to learn it. If not, I just wanted to give you an update about what's going on in my world, and I appreciate you taking the time to read this email. Sincerely, Hannah. That is, I don't know, my opinion, I think that would be a totally normal way to reach out to somebody, even if you haven't spoken with them for years. What do you think, Ashira?
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is just give them a little bit of a reminder of where you met. Again, they may not do them any, favors, but I know, and it's not uncommon to reach out or be reached out to, 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years later. I've had people in my network reach out. It's even, I live in New York, so people definitely come and, go. So I had somebody I hadn't talked to in 14 months say, they sent me a message on LinkedIn, hey, Ashira, I'm going to be in the city on Wednesday. Do you want to grab coffee? And, I said, okay, sure. I was like, give me, again, thank you, LinkedIn. So I was able to like stalk. I'm like, all right, who is this person where? So, my question is always to, again, when I send the message, are you going to remember me? So just again, hey, we had met at this event, maybe a brief thing that you chatted about, because that's always memorable. A little anecdote, again, keep it really quick. I met you here. I remember we had a great conversation about, cheesecake, and then keep going.
Cool. I like it. So to transition back to the interview process, there's something that I would love to ask you about, and that is, what is the purpose of a resume? What is the purpose of a cover letter? Like, why do they exist?
So they exist because they've been around forever. Now, the resume exists for a lot of companies moving to something that you'll probably see a lot of letters called ATS, it's an automated applicant tracking system. So what it is it's basically an algorithm that literally scans your resume looking for keywords that match the job description. That's kind of the main point of a resume. The second is for, again, the hiring manager to look at it and go, okay, this person has actually worked before, or I see that they've worked in a similar industry, or, they've got 15 years in sales. So, they'd be a great fit for the sales position. But the cover letter that's you. That's what is going to tell them who you are and what makes you different, because resumes are all going to read pretty similar. It's a history of what you've done. So that doesn't tell them anything other than your actual just qualifications, which of course you on paper doesn't mean much. You on paper, when you're writing a 2 to 3 paragraph cover letter, does. So my cautionary tale with the resumes is I see a lot of them with, this design and this really like, they're all done up and people pay way too much money for that. You don't need it. Clean and simple is better. Bullet points, do not put things in paragraphs. Always use bullet points. Use bold for headings to distinguish. Make sure that there's proper spacing. That's what makes a good resume, not flashy colors and, something that you paid $300 for.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I want to dig deeper. What can you do beyond just like the formatting of the cover letter? What are some good things to talk about in the cover letter itself? I think sometimes people get, or even myself, I'll get, I guess, writer's block when it comes to a cover letter. What do you suggest?
Use the job description for that, because it's always going to give you insight into, what the role might entail. So, that's going to say, again, if they say, we need someone who's we need super creative problem solvers. So in your cover letter, explain how you solved a problem. Keep it short and sweet. You want to say, again, this was the problem. This was how I approached it. This was the solution. You're showing them that you're a problem solver versus the person that writes, I'm a fantastic problem solver. Sincerely, Ashira, versus you illustrating that for them.
Yeah.
And
So, oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
the other thing is that, again, do your homework online, like see what looks, again, if there's something in the company culture that really stands out. Again, maybe you can say, I love the community aspect that I see on your team, and I'm, think that I would really thrive in that environment. So it's also showing your personality and that you took the time to do some research.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that makes a lot of sense. So it's almost like the cover letter is an area to tell a story and really engage somebody. Not too in depth of a story, but keep it brief, but tell a story. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And keep it brief. Nobody is going to read a cover letter that's more than 3 paragraphs.
Yep.
And nobody, and also too, when I mean 3 paragraphs, I don't mean a page's worth of 3 paragraphs, because yes, I've seen those too. Brevity is your friend. These will not be read thoroughly. They will be skimmed first. That's your first impression, is you have less than 7 seconds to make a first impression. That's in paper, that's in person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the other big thing that you should be looking to do when it comes to your resumes and cover letter, you're selling your potential. As an 18 to 22-year-old, they are not expecting you to come in as the guru of XYZ thing. They are saying, hey, you have potential and that you are someone that's hungry to learn more. And that shows a lot about who you are and your character. So when it comes out in your cover letter and resume, I think that shows a lot about you. Whereas if you're saying like, hey, I already know this, I already know that, it's like you're 22. They're not, you don't have more experience than the 29-year-old. So you're like not competing for that type of job, but just say, hey, I'm hungry to learn more. I'm actively and eager and interested in learning more.
Yeah, exactly. Because no hiring manager is going to expect you to have the same amount of knowledge and skills as a 30-year-old. So when in a way, if you try to be like, well, I'm amazing at everything. Well, no, you're not. Because first of all, nobody is. And second of all, you haven't had the time to get amazing at everything yet. If you're amazing at one thing and that is truly a strength for you, again, use it as an anecdote, tell a story. That's really the whole, like, whether you're interviewing, whether you're going on, again, this is an informational interview, a callback, the final interview, you're telling a story. That's how you sell yourself. Not by saying you're the best at anything, because again, there's no measurable thing. You're not competing against the others, so you can't measure the best. You can only measure yourself. And by doing that, you're saying, hey, hiring manager, here's hard proof of how I solved a challenge, how I applied myself, how I'm eager to learn. And that's the biggest favor you can do for yourself, really, in an interview.
Yeah, no, really, really good point. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that then leads to a point that I always like to make. And this is sometimes a question that's asked in the interview process. When someone asks you, hey, what is your greatest weakness? I think this is my go-to when you're talking about college students. And the go-to is this. You say, hey, my greatest weakness, I'm inexperienced. I'm 22 years old. I'm still working on getting more experience, but I'm extremely hardworking and I'm eager to learn more. I like that because one, it's a weakness that's a real weakness. It's not something that like you're not given the, well, sometimes I work too hard, or sometimes I'm just a perfectionist and I make everybody else's life easier. And so therefore I just want to make sure that like no one really actually has to work and I'm just like working too hard. And sometimes I'm like, oh, Garrett, you're doing too perfect of work. How could you be doing another bad? And I'd be like, oh, my bad. Like, that's not a weakness. But so often you hear that. And it's such a lame response. But I think a real authentic response you can give is, hey, I'm inexperienced. I'm still here to learn more skills, but I'm hungry. I want to learn more. I'm eager to learn more. And I think that's a great way to answer that. What do you think?
It is. And I mean, yes, to your point, 1,000% that, no, you don't want to say, oh, I multitask too much, or, again, all those frivolous things. It's like, yeah, you Googled something and that's what it said to do. No, exactly to your point. Inexperience is a true weakness. And, again, the question, is it a bit of a weakness is a really strong term. So it's really the way that I like everyone to think about it is that what is your biggest opportunity? So you can also, again, again, if you're inexperienced, that's an opportunity to learn more. let's say that you are an introvert and you're really quiet. That can be your quote unquote weakness, your opportunity. You say, I am working on being more outspoken, being more outgoing. It's being authentic, and you're not giving the hiring manager a BS answer. I'll tell you one thing, and this is from my own experience and definitely others. When, especially with early career professionals like yourselves, when you're going for job number 1 or 2 or 3, we're not really necessarily looking for an actual answer per se. We're looking for how you answer it. So are you giving us BS? I work really hard, and too much, and I don't know when to turn off. Or, no, here's something that I personally feel like I need to work on.
I love that. That's a really good advice. That's a really, really good tip. That's really cool. So I want to transition to the interview itself. Preparing for the interview, what should I be doing to make sure that I'm giving out the best possible impression of myself? Like, what can I do before it's even started to prepare for the interview?
So, I mean, it starts again, do your homework. That's kind of the moral of the story for everything. So that goes without saying. Do your homework, know the company, know the hiring manager's name. That's, if you can walk in and say, hello, Mary, it's great, to meet you. That's a huge step that hopefully, again, hopefully everyone else is prepared too, so they'll be doing it, but that's not often the case. So, get yourself armed with the facts. However, I caution against over preparing and over rehearsing your answers. You want to, again, think of what is your weakness? What is your strength? Why do you want this job? There's always the standard questions that are going to be asked. Think of your answers, but do not rehearse them. Because what happens is in the interview, one of two things will happen. You'll get so stuck in your own head, you'll be going, oh my God, wait, what did I practice? What did I say? What am I forgetting? That you'll forget half of it, or you'll come off very robotic because you'll be going blah, 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 done. And the hiring manager's like, cool. So you they can tell that you practiced. So
robot.
Right. Robot. Exactly. So, give yourself a break. Don't over prepare in that sense. And then when it comes to the night before, lay out your clothes, pick what you want to wear. When you get up in the morning, put on those clothes. Do not change. Do not open your closet. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Wear what you picked out. Because I know that even for myself, I'll spend 10 minutes changing and I'll go back to outfit number 1. So again, don't stress yourself out in the morning. Have a good breakfast if you eat breakfast. If you don't eat breakfast, don't make yourself eat breakfast. And then leave way more than enough time to get there. If you're driving, leave double the amount of time. You never know. If you're taking public transit, leave double the amount of time. Or if you're in New York City, leave triple the amount of time. It's, you don't want to be stressed out. The worst thing that can happen is you find a local cafe or you sit in your car and listen to podcasts. What is the worst thing you can do is be rushing into that interview, because you're going to be stressed out, sweating, everything. You're not going to be in the right frame of mind. That goes back to that again, state. You need to be calm and centered. If you meditate. Now, a cautionary tale. If you chew gum or eat candy or anything like that to calm your nerves, spit it out first before you even walk in the door. Same thing if you're listening to music with your earbuds in, take them out, because your interview starts from the second you walk in that door. It can be the doorman in the building, it can be the receptionist. They could be evaluating you. And in a lot of companies, this is starting to be standard process, especially the secretary. Secretaries see and hear everything, even when they're not in the room. I don't know how they do it, but make eye contact, say good morning, say thank you, ask them, again, oh, I'm meeting, Mary Johnson. Is she in room 304? They'll say yes. Great. Thank you. Make eye contact. Again, if there's a doorman, he holds the door open, thank him. It takes 3 seconds. And it can literally be the difference between you and someone else getting that job, because that sense of courteousness is sadly not common anymore. And when you're going in for an interview, you're nervous. So you're in your own world. You may just, head down, you're buried in your phone, you've got your earbuds in, you're chewing gum. You're just trying to not freak out. So you're not, intentionally ignoring people. But again, just being conscious of those around you and giving yourself enough time to do your routine. Again, if you know that you're going to be really stressed out and meditation helps, give yourself enough time. If you have a 10-minute meditation, leave time to do that first.
Yeah, I like it. It's just sometimes genuine manners. And then on top of that, I'm a big believer in, if you have an interview, leave your phone in the car. I don't even have it. I don't want it. I don't need it as a distraction. Like, if you have that out, because phones, here's what phones do. Phones create barriers between you and the person that you're speaking with, even if it's informal. If you've ever been to like a lunch or a dinner with somebody and they put their phone, but it's face down, they're like, oh, it's only face down. Or if you've ever been in that sort of scenario and then someone calls them and they lift it up and they look and they're like, oh, I'm not going to answer that. It's like, oh, golly, like, who am I that I deserve that I would be, talking to you, that you would ignore this call that's in the middle of our conversation right now to have. It's just so disrespectful. So I'm a big believer, leave it in the car. Don't have it out. What could you possibly need your phone for? Like, unless it is a software developer job for apps that you've made on phones that you can only show on your phone, then in which case have your phone. That's appropriate. Outside of that, I don't see any other reason why you would ever need to have your phone anywhere near the interview setting.
That's a great point. And it's also, it removes the temptation. If you don't have it, again, or if if you're in the city, put it at the bottom of your bag and like put a bunch of stuff on top of it.
Yeah.
Then you won't be tempted, because it's an inadvertent response. A phone buzzes, and even if you're holding your phone, you still pick it up. You're like, I'm literally holding this. It's not buzzing, but I have to look at it. We're robots. We're trained. And again, yeah, if it's not there, you can't look at it. And the same thing, again, I forgot to mention again, always put your phone on silent, and not vibrate, but full silent. Like, go into your settings and disable vibrate. So it's like there's nothing, because then you won't hear the phantom vibrate. You won't have a notification pop up. If out of sight, out of mind.
Totally. So I guess what I'd be curious to know is, what if I'm in the interview and I realize after the interview was over that I forgot something, that I forgot to say something? Or maybe it's at the end of the interview and I just remembered it, but it's like, we're out of time. What do you suggest people do in that type of situation?
So if it's at the very end of the interview, you can always say, oh my gosh, you know what? I totally forgot to mention, make it really brief, that, I have, I developed this great app, and you know what? I'll send you the link to it in a follow-up email. So you're respecting that the time is over, but you're saying, oh, wait, one more thing. Now, if you've forgotten completely, and this happens all the time, this is where the follow-up email comes in. Now, you should always 100% of the time send a follow-up message. It does not always have to be an email. It can be a follow-up voicemail. It can be a follow-up snail mail postcard or a traditional email. Then you say, you know what? It was great chatting with you. Thank you. I also wanted to mention, and then you say what you forgot to mention. You don't say that you forgot to mention it. You say, oh, I'd also love to let you know this, X and Y. And again, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to hearing from you in, again, if they've told you 2 weeks, I look forward to hearing from you in 2 weeks' time. Just, a little subtle reminder to them that, hint, hint, you told me 2 weeks. I'm holding you to that. There's no harm in adding additional information to help sell yourself, whether that's after the fact or during the interview.
I think that's an interesting point. I would say the only case on that I would maybe disagree with is brevity. Brevity, I think, is key with that. Like, you don't want to have a massive essay about the one thing that you left off in the interview in that follow-up email, because if it becomes like, when you open up the email, if it's more than me reading this in like 20 seconds, I'm not going to read it, like, plain and simple. So I'm going to look at that and be stressed out immediately if it's going to take me more than 40 seconds to read the whole email. So I think if there's a final point that you're going to make it quick. What do you think?
Oh yeah. And that's everything. Everything should be brief. Your answers in the interview also need to be brief, because what happens is that the longer you talk, the longer that you've gotten away from the initial point of the story. So this is a trick, that you want to basically give yourself 3 sentences to answer any question. Formulate it with, again, a what or an intro, a how or a why, and a resolution. And everything fits into that framework, and it can be done with 3 to 6 sentences.
Yeah,
And
no,
that's,
that's cool.
and you can, you can kind of count them if you know that you tend to go on to a, too wordy, or you go, oh, and then this, and then that, and then I also did this, and then, and the hiring manager goes like, wait, what the heck were we talking about, a minute ago? So again, brevity in writing, brevity in speaking is your friend in an interview for sure.
Yeah. So it is 8:45. I want to take this moment right now to, ask the students a question. I wanted to ask you, I guess one thing I would want to ask you right now, post in the comment section, what is something that you've learned right now from listening to Ashira and I talk about interviews? And what are some questions that you have? Post them in the comments area. One, I want to learn what you learned. And then two, if you've got any questions, I'd love if you could post it. I know Jillian's got a question. She asked if I'm working on a cover letter for an internship, and one thing that I read was to acknowledge that I may not fit all of the requirements. How do you approach including that in the cover letter?
Leave it out. It goes without saying that you're not necessarily going to meet all of the requirements. So you don't need to explicitly state that. Instead, state that you're really hungry to learn and that you'd love to, build your skills further. That's where you're acknowledging that, no, I don't check every box, but I'm hungry to, when I'm done with this internship, to check every box.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then Noah asked the question, how many times should we reach out after an interview? Just once, thanking them? And I guess that kind of leads into another question that I had. Is ghosting a thing in the interview process?
Yes, ghosting is a thing. And I can't roll my eyes enough because employers for decades go, oh, it's unfair that candidates leave us. And meanwhile, 80 to 90% of candidates will never hear anything back from their employers. So employers are the official original ghosters. So for the follow-up, 3 times. So again, your initial, your thank you message should be no more than 48 hours out. Ideally, it's within 24. Again, top of mind, it's there, it's quick, you're acknowledging. Now, what you also want to do is, again, get a kind of sense of a time frame at the end of the interview. So again, when can I expect a follow-up? They will always be able to tell you. Now, they're also going to say, 10 days, which means just double that. It can easily be 3 weeks. But if they've said 10 days, then on day 11, if you haven't heard from them, you send another, again, quick, brief message. Hey, hiring manager, just wanted to, check in. Is there anything else that, I can answer? Any other questions I can answer for you? Again, just let me know where things stand. Thanks, me, and done. Literally like 2 to 3 sentences, no more than that. Give it about, I say anywhere from 3 to 4 days after that. Send a third. If it's a job that you really, really want, send 4 and 5. Otherwise, if you haven't heard from 3, then unfortunately, you probably got ghosted.
That's unfortunate. That's crazy. I bet you could probably call them as well, just as a follow-up. Just to check in. I think often it's easy to ignore a phone call. It's easy to ignore an email. It's tough to ignore a phone call. So I think that would be pretty key. Aaron asked the question, what are some good questions to ask employers in an interview? I guess rather the other way of putting this is, are there any lame questions that people ask because it's on some website that says you should ask this question in an interview, and you thought to yourself, man, you and everybody else has asked me this super lame question? So I guess the question I'm asking is, are there good questions and are there lame questions to ask in the interview at the very end?
Yeah. In terms of lame, it's like, oh, well, tell me more about the company culture. Well, what do you want to know? Ask specific. So if you want to, because that's a great question to ask, is to delve into the company culture a little bit, but frame it in, how often do teams get together? Is there an active social component to working on this team? You're asking about the company culture without going, hey, what's the company culture? So framing it in that way. Other than that, questions that are truly bad to ask are, how many vacation days do I get? How quickly can I take vacation? You don't want it, because every hiring manager knows that that's incredibly important. But for you to actually open your mouth and ask that question is going to leave a sour taste in their mouth. That's the kind of thing that that can be interview, when you're in the final round of interviews, if, if you've got, say, an upcoming vacation, because this comes up too, like let's say you're interviewing for a company, but you've got, it's October, you've got a vacation planned for Thanksgiving, like for say 4 or 5 days. When you're at the final round of interviews, like especially you'll have a sense of if it's going to happen. Then you can ask, again, what's your vacation policy? I just want to know because I have something coming up around Thanksgiving. Just again, that's doing a courtesy. Don't ask that when you're in interview number 1. It's too soon.
I honestly, I don't know. I think, well, definitely, I don't think you should do an interview number 1. I don't even think you should do that in interview number 5. I think you should wait till you have the offer before I think that when you get the offer, that's when you can negotiate your salary. That's when you can negotiate vacation. I think that's when you can start to announce those things. Because I think it's a trade-off of leverage. I think when the company posts the job, they're giving leverage to you. They're saying, hey, we're vulnerable. We need to fill this position. And then when you apply, they kind of retain that vulnerability back because they say, okay, cool, you're interested in this job. Great, let's assess you. And then once they give you the offer, you have the leverage back again, because then you can say, hey, okay, cool, that's amazing. Here are a couple of things that I, would love to chat with you about. I know the salary says this, but in reality, I've been paid like this at other jobs. I would like to maintain that standard of living. Can you help get me close to that? And then, hey, I've got this upcoming vacation. This is something that I want to make sure that we're able to work out together. Because at the end of the day, like, they've already chosen you. Whereas if you tell them that in the final interview and it's between you and somebody else, like, that could be the deciding factor. But this could be the job that you have for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. What do you think, Ashira?
That's why it's really tough, because again, you have to really read the interview. Again, you'll know sometimes, like, you basically get like the little like wink from the hiring manager, like, okay, you're in. So in that, like, again, I would say, I guess your advice is the better overarching. I guess mine is like, this is, so here, we'll do this for when you're starting for your first couple of jobs, then no, don't even mention it until you have the offer. Once you've done some more interviews and you kind of get this, the more that you interview, what that little hiring manager, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge is. And in that case, just being, transparent again I guess, I think too, with something like Thanksgiving, if it's like a tropical vacation, like in the middle of July, yeah, nobody needs to know about that until you're employed. But like, holiday travel, like, that's a thing. Yeah. But otherwise, like, just ask questions that you want to know more of. One that's really clever, that's great for, again, and especially with an internship or your first job, is ask the hiring manager what they enjoy most about working there. It gives you a little bit of insight. It's something that, it might open them up and go, oh, okay, just make them open a little bit more. So, I always like to have that one as, kind of like an, up your sleeve, because that's something that's never going to get a bad answer, and you'll gain some kind of insight into the company, good or bad.
Yeah. So here's some advice that I learned so I'm a huge nerd, and this is, by the way, very off the wall advice, but this is something that I learned from Dr. Robert Cialdini in his book, Persuasion. And Dr. Robert Cialdini is a behavioral psychologist. And one of the things that he mentioned was that people, when they come into an interview, especially if they've been doing interview after interview after interview after interview, back to back to back to back, that they kind of get into this rut almost of mentality of thinking. And so if you can change their state, then you can get them to think about you in a different light. So what he suggests is that when you go into an interview, you go in immediately and you say this. You say, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to interview with me today. I'm sure that you have a lot of questions for me, but before we get started, I was hoping that I could ask you a question. And they'll say something like, yeah, sure, shoot. And you say, why did you decide to offer me the opportunity to interview with you today? Now, what that does is 2 things. One is it gets them to think about you in a positive light. So all of a sudden, as opposed to trying to be nitpicky about what you wore or anything else that was going on, something that happened earlier in the day, what it does is it gets them thinking like, wow, I really like that you had that internship experience, and I really like that you had that volunteer experience. Maybe they didn't talk about some part-time job that you had. Okay, great. They've told you that they really like the internship and the part-time job. And then the second thing that it does is it gives you a rubric for what the rest of the conversation should be like. So when they say, hey, tell me about a time that you faced adversity, you should talk about that internship or that volunteer role, not about the part-time job, because they've already told you this is the experience that they valued. But I know it's different. I know it's a very crazy bit of advice. What do you think about that, Ashira?
I say go for it. Because you know what? It's that same kind of thing. You're not asking them like, and a question that's going to make you come off as rude or unprepared. You're asking them a question that's going to throw them for a loop in a good way. And, for all of my introverts out there, I know that that can be scary. So if you're not comfortable, then ask that same question at the very end. Make that be when they ask you, what questions do you have for me? Then you can ask it then if you're not comfortable doing it up front. But I think that's a really cool strategy. I would, again, from the hiring manager standpoint, I'd say, cool, what the heck? Also, too, it would break up my day because, again, yeah, we batch interview. And, you could be interview number 25 of the day, and maybe the coffee ran out like an hour ago. You never know. So I think that's really cool advice. I'd never heard that. So I love it. I really do.
Cool. Well, yeah. And I mean, that's just something that I got from him. And I think he's got some really interesting insight. His book Persuasion is pretty good. But Luke asked the question. He said he's read that it's good to kind of sum up your resume in your cover letter. Is that a good idea, or is it better to focus on one key highlight?
It depends on how much diverse experience you have. So going in, again, it's what role are you interviewing for? That's what's really important. So the cover letter for, 95% of the time should really be more specific, because again, they have your resume as well, and they're going to skim that. You're wasting precious reading, time, if you will, by repeating. So again, call out the one key thing. I am fantastic at sales. That's, your cover letter. They can read the rest of your history on the resume. So I am a very firm believer of keep the two separate.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, your resume is your resume, your cover letter is your cover letter. I believe your cover letter should really reflect the job description itself. When it comes to what are they looking for, what are the keywords that they've mentioned, I mean, leverage that as like your basis, because that's what you're selling yourself on. This isn't a regurgitation of your resume. I mean, that's just unless you plan on nobody reading your cover letter, yeah, I would suggest that you personalize it. Now, I'm not saying you spend, a million hours writing it. I'm just saying that you look at the job description, you say, hey, this is why I think it'd be really good for this role. I've got, here's a story of a time that I did this. Keep it real brief.
Yep. And the thing is that you should have a customized version of your cover letter and your resume for each position. Now, again, to Garrett's point, do not take a million hours. Template, change things, change the order of your bullet points. So again, if you're applying for a sales role and just, say a general role, when you're applying for the sales role, bump up the sales bullet point to number 1, because that's what they're going to look at first. Tailor your cover letter. You should only be changing anywhere from 15 to 20% of your cover letter and your resume. And in your resume, you're not changing, you're reordering the resume and you're rewriting. So really, if it's taking you more than 15 minutes to customize either one, it's too long. Get your base, tweak as needed. 5 to 10 minutes is really all it should take you to submit the personalized cover letter and the tailored resume.
Yeah. Ashira, I want to ask you one last question before we go into the final component of this workshop. And the question I had was, if I get an offer, but I'm waiting to hear back from other companies, what should I do? How should I handle that situation?
So this is a tricky one, and requires a giant leap of faith. Now, hopefully you'll have a good vibe from, let's say you've got, it's down to 2 and you've gotten the offer, but you're still waiting to hear from the other, and they had told you it was going to be, a couple of weeks. Now, what you can do is the initial outreach to job number 1, the one that you were offered, you can always take up to 24 hours to respond, no more than that. You can say, thank you, could I have 48 hours to sleep on this and think about it? So you can buy yourself close to 72 hours. You can get almost 3 days of thinking time. And there's nothing wrong. No one's going to ever fault you for that. You're communicating. You're not just, again, if you don't email them, they're like, okay, we got ghosted. So ask for time. Immediately after receiving that offer, email or call the other company you're waiting to hear from and say, I just want to touch, base with you, see how things are progressing, get a feel for where it's at. Because you don't want to immediately come out and say, I have another offer, so hey, what are you going to give me? Because that just comes off as cocky. it's the truth, but it comes the way that you're delivering it. So again, figure them out, get feelers. In this case, I recommend actually picking up the phone and calling them, because it's a lot easier to read their tone. It's a lot easier to get information out of them when you're speaking versus an email that they can either ignore or just say, we're still working on it, we'll respond soon, thanks, X, send. Soon can mean whenever. Now, again, see what happens in that first one when you're coming up to that 72 hours. Then you can say, hey, I have received another offer. I'm really torn between, I really loved, X, Y, and Z that we spoke about. Blah, blah, blah. Again, brevity. I loved X and Y. I'd still be a great fit because Z. Where do things stand? Now, they may say, okay, no, we still need another 2 weeks. And in that case, make a pros and cons list, and you have to take the leap of faith. You really can't buy yourself more than 3 days with the other employer. If you're lucky, they'll email you on a Wednesday so that you can take that till Friday, and then no one works on the weekend, so you have until Monday. But in that case, it's really it's a leap of faith. You just have to say, all right, how would I feel if this offer falls through and company number 2 does not give me an offer? And I've been in that situation myself. And, to this day, I don't know. I declined offer number 1. I got offer number 2 that was not as good as I was expecting. And I probably, I might have been better off with number 1. But guess what? Time does not move backwards. So it will forever be a mystery. I didn't dwell on it. I didn't, I do still think of it to this day, but just as a curiosity point, because I moved forward. I chose path number 2 and I stuck with that. And the thing is that you can always start over again. If it's not the right fit, you're not locked into this job now until the day you die. You can always keep looking. So you never feel that you're stuck at the end of something.
I love that. That's awesome. That's really, really great advice. Well, Ashira, thank you so much for being here tonight. One thing I wanted to cover before we end is just back to our deliverable from this evening, students. Deliverable is to get a new accountability partner, share with that person 3 things that you've learned this week, and 1 thing that you've done to get closer to landing that job or internship. Take a picture with that person, send it to either Sydney or myself. Alternatively, you can just post on LinkedIn. What are 3 things that you've learned? Tag us. That's how we know that you did it. We'll give you credit for it. That'd be awesome. And then remember the referral program. If you could refer people to sign up for Ambition to Motion next semester, would greatly appreciate it. If you refer 3 people, your deposit's cut in half. If you first 6 or more, you don't even have to pay a deposit. You are good to go for the program. Would love to have your help with encouraging students to get involved. How can students find you, Ashira?
So I am, again, mostly on LinkedIn. So just find me, Ashira Prossack. Just, search my name. I'm also on Twitter. And yeah, here's my accountability. I keep saying I'm going to post more on Twitter. So here, you all heard it first. Follow me on Twitter, and I'm going to actually try to post more than once every, I don't know, I think I posted 3 months ago. So, and then, again, I hang out mostly on LinkedIn, and I'm going to be starting a video series of just kind of workplace tips, interview tips. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and drop me a message with anything that you'd like me to answer for you as a question on one of those tips.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, hey, everybody, thank you so much for being here this evening. Ashira, thank you so much for being here this evening. This was awesome. Really, really great insight. I think it's really helped a lot of students as they take that next step for their careers. Reach out to Ashira if you want to get connected with her. Thank you all for being here tonight. Have a great rest of your evening.